welcome to another pterodactyl fighting, cyber-infused edition of Defending the Despised, the ongoing series where I take disliked things from the Doctor Who universe down to my cyber conversion table, and see if I can defend them from their bad reputations amongst fans. This time, I've got a very big challenge on my hands, especially because this is the very first non-Doctor Who episode I'm going to be defending. I previously defended the spin-off Class as a whole, but this time I'm dipping back into the world of Doctor Who spin-offs for one of Chris Chibnall's most controversial and despised works, Cyberwoman. And no, I haven't lost my mind. Well, not any more than I already have. Despite Torchwood having a pretty negative reception amongst most fans, Cyberwoman stands out above the others. This story explores Janto Jones's dark secret, which is his girlfriend, who was partially converted into a Cyberman during the events of the Doctor Who Series 2 finale. However, the main reason this episode is despised so very much is because of the costume of the so-called Cyberwoman. However, if you're able to look past this one aspect of the episode, can it actually serve as one of the best Cyberman stories in the live-action Doctor Who franchise? Well, grab your pterodactyl barbecue sauce and put on an awkward metal bra, because it's time to defend Cyberwoman. So, as we all know, Doctor Who Series 2 culminated in a big fight between the Daleks and the Cybermen in the middle of London.
You have declared war upon the Cybermen. This is not war, this is pest control!
Showrunner Russell T Davies realised there was a story begging to be told about the aftermath of this big battle, so he asked Torchwood head writer Chris Chibnall to create an episode of a Cyberman in the basement of the Torchwood hub, which eventually became Cyberwoman. And okay, I know how this usually works. I usually go through the episode piece by piece from the beginning, looking at all the good stuff and weighing it up with all the bad stuff. But to be honest, with an episode like this, I feel like I have to immediately address the big metal elephant in the room. The main issue everyone has with this episode is the costume of the titular Cyberwoman. Cybermen are meant to be these big, intimidating, inhuman monsters, but instead, this Cyberwoman has, to put it simply, it just seems so counterintuitive. Why would you dress up such a scary monster like this? It's just so baffling why they would sexualize a Cyberman. There are so many ways to explore partial conversions, but this terrible design just seems to work against the monster, because it makes the threat harder to take seriously. So for some people, I completely understand how it almost literally strips away anything good from the episode. As much as we all hate the design, I like that they at least rationalise it by explaining that the Cybermen were just rushing to get conversions done, and get as many units as possible to fight the Daleks, forgoing the usual brain transplants and just slapping armour onto bodies. I think it's a very logical way to go about it. It's a story beat that makes a lot of sense. It's just that the breastplate lets the concept down so much. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's okay, because it's really not. Even though I like the concept they were going for, the metal tits are completely worthy of the constant ridicule. It's beyond stupid. But if you overlook this flaw, it's actually one of the best Cyberman stories of the modern era of Doctor Who. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but bear with me, because it's actually the exact kind of Cyberman story people have wanted for decades.
If there's a Cyberman in this building, we need a last line of defense. Just make sure it never gets to the outside world.
From the very beginning, the Cyberwoman is given a lot of presence and importance. There's a very methodical, intense build-up showing that iconic armour and all of the medical equipment as that music ramps up, with the great industrial guitar kicking in at the sight of the Cyberwoman. Even though the reveal is spoiled by the title, it's such a good stinger to open the episode. One of the deadliest creatures to ever attack the planet is in the basement of our protagonist's base. If you're familiar with Doctor Who, you instantly understand why this is an oh shit moment, because you know what the presence of a Cyberman means. However, even if you aren't familiar with the main show, the pure visual of the Cyberwoman is striking enough to make you perk up and realise this is something very important and threatening, because it just looks alien and wrong. This person covered in armour and machinery, being kept alive by this strange life support. I like that Dr. Tanizaki is fascinated by the Cybermen, having wanted to study one ever since the events of Doomsday. It's a very realistic character motivation, since as a species we would jump at an opportunity like this, to study an alien or otherworldly being, to see how it works and what it actually is. I just think it keeps the show grounded and establishes a firm continuity between Doctor Who and Torchwood, exploring the fallout of that Series 2 finale, which saw Cybermen all over the world. It's basically a sequel to that story, with Lisa being the last Cyberman left in the world. With a story as big in scope as Doomsday, a sequel or follow-up is almost mandated, because it would change the world so fundamentally. So many people at Torchwood 1 were being converted during the battle that it would obviously have had consequences on people across the country. People who lost family members, lovers, friends to this Cyberman invasion. An important thing to note is that the episode stresses that the Cybermen began to desperately use materials from our planet in conversions, explaining why conversions like Lisa weren't sucked back into the void. I just think that's an important thing to note because it's one of the biggest potential plot holes in the story that a lot of people still point to as a reason for this episode being bad, but it actually accounts for that possibility.
The Cybermen needed soldiers fast.
They started upgrading whole bodies instead of transplanting brains, using Earth technology.
I also think the partially converted Cyberman is such a great narrative to explore. It's a concept that had appeared before in stories like Attack of the Cybermen, but it's always such a very strong story to tell. Cyberwoman does this incredibly well in my opinion. It explores how there's still humanity there, along with the lengths someone would go to keep their loved one alive despite their horrific fate. Janto is put in such a horrible position, so you can't really blame him for trying to keep her alive, since she means everything to him. He just wants to save her because he knows she still has humanity, but he also knows his teammates would never approve of having this huge threat on our planet. And as we find out, they're right to feel that way. But I still think it's hard to blame Janto for trying to keep her alive. The story also shows that battle between Lisa and the Cyberman she was being upgraded into. She may still be half human, but that means she's also half Cyberman. I feel like this makes her attempt to convert Dr. Tanizaki very logical and understandable. It's a Cyberman's instinct to want to convert people, it's literally the driving force of their existence. So it's the best way to kickstart the episode's descent into chaos. I don't think that she was laying there scheming and planning the whole time. I think it's simply a battle between her two sides, facing a really deep personal inner conflict. However, even though I understand that Janto salvaged cyber conversion parts to use as life support, I'm not sure why he kept the big cyber army knife conversion system as well. That's just begging for trouble. That being said, the attempt to convert Tanizaki gives us such a great visual, with parts of a Cyberman helmet sticking out from his jaw and covering up his eye. It looks so gruesome and visceral, the exact kind of body horror Cyberman stories yearn for, but can't achieve because of Doctor Who's audience. Torchwood doesn't have that limit however, so it can have this kind of body horror that the monster requires. Cyberwoman also turns the Cybermen into a really intimidating horror movie slasher villain, but in a good way. Firstly, there's that shot of Lisa laying on the conversion table, the lights flickering as she grins maniacally. It shows that she's beyond redemption, more Cyberman than human. It's also reminiscent of Frankenstein, which as we all know is intrinsically linked to the monster. Lastly, I also think that Cyberwoman takes a lot of inspiration from Dalek in Series 1. It has this lone, damaged Cyberman wrecking shop, and posing an insurmountable threat to our protagonists. Lisa just appears in the darkness and overpowers anyone she comes across. Even Captain Jack doesn't know what to do, which really shows how much of a threat she is to the team. I remember this being the first of only 2 Torchwood episodes I saw part of as a kid, and this episode was honestly terrifying to me. I couldn't sleep for weeks after it. The episode is structured in such a good way to make it so tense and scary. Cyberwoman is a base under siege in more of a literal sense than other Doctor Who stories, because this is essentially the TARDIS of the show. This Torchwood hub tucked safely away in Cardiff Bay has now been infiltrated by such a deadly force. The threat is right there on our protagonist's doorstep, inside their own base without anything they can do about it. The lack of lighting also adds to this horror atmosphere, because all our characters have are torches, combined with this constant red light bathing the episode. The team spends a lot of time split up and apart from each other, which just paces things well. It allows Owen to come across the conversion table, straight away understanding its cyber technology. He knows what happened to Torchwood 1, he knows about the Battle of Canary Wharf, continuing that presence of the episode as a sequel to the Series 2 finale. It's also a good use of the characters to communicate the threat of the Cybermen. Owen and Jack both have such strong reactions of fear at this revelation, being characters who know firsthand how devastating the Cybermen are capable of being. It also serves as a way of telling new viewers about what Lisa is and why she poses such a threat. Gwen is much like a Doctor Who companion, so she has no idea, which means Owen has to quickly explain what the cyber conversion unit is, cluing both her and the new audience in on the threat and why it means so much. It's such a good way of building up the villain.
These things brought down Torchwood 1. Why is there one in our bloody basement?
However, Owen gets taken out of the equation, leaving Gwen alone with Lisa. She tries to convert Gwen, and I love that Lisa's voice becomes more like the traditional Cyberman voice. It further shows that complete loss of humanity. Janto's precious Lisa is gone, she's pure Cyberman now, and the people around him are gonna suffer as a result. Gwen's near conversion is a great sequence with really high stakes since everyone is helpless. The episode already showed what happens to people in this situation, because there was that failed conversion of Dr. Tanizaki. Because of this earlier establishment, you immediately understand how bad her predicament is, and how close to death she is if she isn't rescued quickly. However, the catch is that to rescue her, the whole base has to be locked down. It shows the huge threat of the Cybermen that this is what they have to do to try and fight it. The ultimate risk, completely sealing themselves in with this huge, world-ending threat. There's then that great scene where Captain Jack explains just how dangerous Janto's actions are to the world, since this is how the Cybermen invasions always start. Someone sympathetic to the cause being used by the Cybermen, with it all spiraling out of control eventually. Just like it's already done here. If the conversion on Dr. Tanizaki had worked, everything would be over already. It's that simple. That's how dangerous the Cybermen are. I've spoken a lot in the past about Captain Jack being like the Doctor in this show, but this is another great speech that shows those parallels, explaining to his human companions the threat of this evil alien race, really driving home the point of how dangerous a single Cyberman is. And again, much like the Doctor does in Age of Steel, Jack tries to fight the Cybermen by showing them the reality of what they are. He makes Lisa look into a reflection and she sees that the conversion failed. She has a small moment of clarity here, her voice becoming ever so slightly human again as she realises what she actually is, before it once again gets overpowered by the Cyberman voice. It continues to show that battle within her mind, and justifies Janto's loyalty to her, showing that she is still partly human somewhere within her mind, so you can still relate to his struggle between aligning with Torchwood and trying to save her, because he knows there's still hope.
There is no turning back for her now.
I'm not giving up on her.
The relentless slasher horror continues when the action ramps up again, Lisa menacingly chasing down our characters as Jack scrambles to think of a plan. It's a great way to use the team dynamic of the show to its full potential, the characters having things to do and all splitting up to survive against this dominant threat. They're up against this overpowered cyborg that can kill them in all sorts of ways. They can't really fight back, they just have to survive and find a way to escape. I feel like it's yet another way of building up Lisa as this huge threat, since it follows those concepts from Dalek. In that episode, it was just about surviving, not destroying the threat. This is the exact same here. They have no access to weapons, no way of killing Lisa, so I feel like the stakes are really intense here. There's a proper sense of hopelessness around this episode, especially because Jack is used to greatly increase the threat posed to our protagonists. Jack is immortal, he's the only character in the show that can die in an episode like this, so that's why I think it's smart to have Lisa kill him, because it shows her threat beyond just the conversions. Initially it seemed all she'd do is grab you and try to convert you, but now she's out for blood and will kill anyone in her way right then and there. If this is something that can temporarily kill Jack, we know it's something that can permanently kill anyone else. So I think it really puts the protagonist in a more fearful and hopeless position as they try to run from her, trying to escape after seeing their leader seemingly murdered in front of them. It really adds to those already established stakes of the episode, furthering this slasher movie atmosphere, since Lisa stalks Owen and Gwen as they try to hide in a really tense scene, since you know exactly what will happen if they're found. I know it's controversial to say, but it's probably the scariest the Cyberman has been in the modern run of Doctor Who, and you can see where the inspiration for Ashad in Series 12 comes from. It's this. Out of all things, this is probably what inspired the way that character acts. Ashad in The Haunting of Villa Diodati is so similar to Lisa here, with that same brutality and lack of mercy, so I really think the partial conversion actually really benefits the story in Cyberwoman, because it adds that psychopathic human touch to the monster. I said before about how hopeless and helpless our characters are at the hands of Lisa, but the fact that she is still part human is a way of giving characters at least a semblance of a chance, with Owen able to stab her in her exposed abdomen. It's something you can't do to a fully converted Cyberman, which shows that Lisa is weaker than one of those, and she's essentially impure, which is actually what eventually leads to her death at the end. Because she's a monster of the week, there always has to be some kind of weakness, and this is it. But it's not actually in the way you'd expect, since the stab isn't actually what kills her, although this moment still presents why she ends up dying, because she's too human and still has those perceived weaknesses. Earlier we saw just how disgusted Lisa is at her human element, having this impurity, with her wanting to put her brain into Janto's body so she can properly upgrade into a Cyberman. She eventually transplants her brain, but this time into the body of the pizza girl who came to, well, deliver pizza. This twist is a really nice way to change up the story, along with giving the team the ability to actually kill her, so it's a smart use of her initial partial conversion. This scene also gives Janto literal blood on his hands after being responsible for the deaths of 2 innocent people at Lisa's doing. You really feel his moral dilemma as he struggles, finding it impossible to shoot her. We saw 2 instances earlier of him not having enough conviction to follow through on threats, and this once again shows that, proving he's too human, he can't kill her. Gareth David Lloyd does so well with this scene as Janto ugly cries, which is something that seems so rare in film and TV. He's a complete emotional wreck. He sacrificed so much to save Lisa, only to be forced into this position of having to be the one that kills her. It's such an understandable moment of emotional pain, because she's all he has left. However, it then turns out that she was still too far down the Cyberman path, as she reveals that she still wants to be upgraded, therefore giving them all go-ahead for the rest of the team to shoot her, finally being able to vanquish this threat now that she's fully human again. I think it's very important to note that this is how they defeat her. They can't kill her inside her armour, so instead they just have to opportunistically kill her after she unknowingly makes that easier for them. It's such a good way of maintaining the Cyberwoman's threat. It protects her because she has to be in a human body to die. They aren't able to properly kill her when she's in that armour. Like I said, it's this stubbornness to be fully converted that kills her, rather than any other kind of weakness. And she ends up dying on the very table she began the episode on, which I just think is very poetic. It's a really good ending, such a strong dramatic scene that pays off all of the struggles and the themes of the episode, giving a real visceral feeling of suffering for Janto, who is the other main focus of the story.
You hid a Cyberman within Torchwood? And you didn't tell us?
Yes, indeed, even though this episode is about the eponymous Cyberwoman, the story is actually mainly about Janto as a character, and that's one of its biggest strengths. The very first scene of Cyberwoman tells you everything you need to know about this character, and his role within the larger Torchwood team. He comes down to the hub dressed in his usual suit and tie, whilst the rest of the team are having fun and playing basketball without a care in the world. It shows a contrast between his stark professionalism and their casual, carefree attitude. It also shows the team bonding by having Gwen more deeply ingrained within the dynamic, but it also shows his position within the team. Nobody notices him, or if they do, they just don't acknowledge him. He's essentially an afterthought, and the only interaction any of them have with him in this opening is Jack giving him the basketball as they all leave. I think it's a really good way of showing how underappreciated Janto is. When you think about it, he hadn't really played any significant part in the first 3 episodes, just showing up here and there to say a couple of lines. He was the least developed character in those first 3 episodes, so I like that this episode plays upon that by turning it into a plot point and making a whole story about this. Much like the viewers at home, the Torchwood team don't know much about Janto. Janto has this big dirty secret hidden away, but the episode makes sure to stress that he isn't actually some evil, scheming person. The whole time he's in a battle between his love for Lisa and his duty to Torchwood and the people of Earth. It mirrors how Lisa is battling between her human nature and her Cyberman nature, creating a nice parallel between the two. Janto is in immediate denial when he sees the partially converted Dr. Tanizaki dead on the floor. He tries to rationalise that it was just some accident, not wanting to believe that Lisa did it on purpose. Even though he's hiding this dangerous secret, he's still a very moral character, because he realises it's all his fault, breaking down as he knows Lisa has ruined everything by trying to convert Tanizaki. All he wants is to save her. He's not a suddenly evil guy scheming to take over the world with his cyber girlfriend. The viewer is never mistaken into thinking the rest of the team knows about Lisa. It's obvious that this is Janto's own secret. It keeps that exploration of his lack of presence, because we were always too focused on the other members and never knew what he was up to. It's especially interesting to note that in day 1, Janto isn't in the scene where Gwen asks if any of the team members have partners, because he does. He's the only other one. but he can't tell anyone because she's a partially converted Cyberman living in their basement. I think that the structure and story of the episode allows the team dynamic to be explored so well throughout it. Initially, they all go out for drinks and leave Janto alone, trusting him with the hub. However, they have to come back suddenly because of a UFO sighting, which throws a 4-person alien hunting team-sized spanner into Janto's plans. You can tell he had been expecting them to be out all night whilst he could get on with it, but instead he has to scramble to hide Lisa away because of the unpredictable nature of the Torchwood job. Aliens don't work on shifts, after all. I think it highlights just how chaotic this job is, without any real break from alien incursions. However, by bringing them back so soon, Janto's secret basically unravels instantly, since Lisa drains the power, alerting the team who are suspicious of Janto's claims of the generator being faulty. It's like he's been caught with his hand in the cookie jar, like having someone over for some bonking and then needing to smuggle them out because your parents come home early. It makes it impossible for him to continue trying to save Lisa, especially because the second power drain makes them suspicious of Janto, beginning a very important fracture in the team that only worsens throughout the story, in some of the best dramatic character-based storytelling Chris Chibnall has ever provided within the Doctor Who franchise. There's that amazing scene of Jack confronting Janto, who points out how he's an afterthought to them. He's nothing. He's just there to clean up after them. Nobody ever asked anything about him in return. I think it's such a good way to show this huge imbalance within the team, how everyone else has a focus and equal footing, but Janto has been completely forgotten about. I feel like it adds a real sympathy to Janto within the story, because you understand his frustrations and desperations. Like I mentioned earlier, he's not a bad guy, he's not evil or trying to scheme, so he's still a relatable and sympathetic character, even though he's so misguided and wrong to be doing what he's doing.
I brought you here to heal you, so we could be together.
After the team forcefully drags an emotionally unstable Janto out of the hub, there's that fantastic scene of our team completely fractured and despondent, with emotions running high, Janto and Jack being forcefully held back from fighting one another. It really shows the personal and emotional effect on all the characters. Moments like this make me feel like Cyberwoman could be a series finale, because the personal stakes and sheer gravitas of the story are so significant. Then there's that final confrontation between Jack and Janto, which is great for the character of Captain Jack. He's full of rage at the betrayal, allowing you to feel how personally hurt he is, after putting so much trust into his team. He's done so much for them, and this is what he gets in return. First, he was betrayed by his second-in-command Susie, who was hiding her obsession with the gauntlet, murdering people just to use it again and again. However, before Jack could confront her, she killed herself. Now he's been betrayed again, by Janto this time, whose betrayal is arguably worse because he's hiding such a dangerous monster in the heart of Torchwood. It brings out such a fierce edge Jack has been lacking up to this point, to the extent that some reviewers even complained about it because they just wanted him to be some goofy action hero character. There was a glimpse of his inner darkness and edge in Ghost Machine, but it comes out fully here, which I think is the best time for it. He's similar to the Ninth Doctor in that aspect he can only take so much before becoming an incredibly vengeful and vicious character if someone crosses him. I feel like it draws this different parallel between him and the Doctor now. Before it had been showing that more alien, enigmatic and inspirational side they share, but now it's showing that darker side they also share. It's such a great moment between Jack and Janto, furthering how fragile this team is. Every single person has a hidden side to them, and they're all on a knife's edge because of the way a job like this can change and influence a person. It's also a good setup for End of Days, where each of the members turn on Jack, mainly because of events like this episode. So Cyberwoman does a good job as a very serialized episode, setting up, continuing, and establishing recurring plot threads and themes that run throughout the series as a whole.
You like to think you're a hero, but you're the biggest monster of all.
Another ongoing theme that I've talked about extensively in my Torchwood videos is that of Gwen trying to balance her life with Torchwood and her life with Rhys at home. This shows again here in a brilliant way. Rhys phones Gwen as she's hiding from Lisa. It's such a stark contrast, with him on a drunk night out while she's hiding from a cyborg killing machine that can destroy the entire planet. And these two lives Gwen is trying to live simultaneously actually end up almost killing her, since the phone call alerts Lisa and gives Gwen and Owen away. I just think this is a very clever continuation of the theme. Day 1 and Ghost Machine had been pretty similar to one another in their approaches, but this is a very new and inventive way to bring it up and continue to highlight that plot thread, keeping it ever present throughout Series 1. The scene also sows the seeds for Gwen's affair with Owen. Whilst they're hiding in the cramped cold chamber, Owen kisses her, which is the beginning of their relationship that lasts till the end of the series. Unlike Reese, she doesn't have to hide these alien happenings from Owen, so I like that he's the one she's currently with when Reese calls, setting up that eventual storyline in the same way that the mutiny in the finale was set up with the confrontation between Jack and Janto. Again, it shows how great Cyberwoman is as a serialized episode. So to wrap up, Cyberwoman falls short for the single reason that they gave Lisa metal tits. It's a fantastic episode otherwise, and I say that without a hint of sarcasm. I honestly think that if that one piece of the design had been changed, it would be an acclaimed episode of Torchwood. It's a gritty, dramatic, graphic story of a Cyberman going on a rampage, which is the kind of Cyberman story fans have been crying out for ever since 10th Planet graced our screens. It has the gory body horror and threatening Cyberman we all wish we could have, but people focus so much on this one element of the design. And yeah, I can't make any excuses for the metal tits, but I don't think it detracts from the story enough to make it so infamous and hated. The only other downside is the awful pterodactyl fight, which just seems so out of place and dumb. It's played completely straight despite her rolling around being pecked to death by a pterodactyl. Why not use the weevils instead? They're much more of a serious threat that would have been a lot more suitable and gruesome for the scene. However, I can overlook this scene because of that personal and emotional drama elsewhere. This is honestly one of Chibnall's best character pieces, really nailing the characters of all the Torchwood members and setting up and continuing such great dynamics throughout. If Torchwood Series 1 was a big Finnish box set, this would be the finale of the first box set because they're all in 4s, and I'm totally okay with that placement. It has a real intense atmosphere to it, with a high stakes feeling and a great exploration of what it means to be a Cyberman, that inner turmoil about only being half Cyberman and half human. I know it's hard to sit here and tell you to ignore the bad costume and the pterodactyl, but there is honestly a brilliant story underneath those two glaring flaws. Something that goes for most episodes I cover in these videos is that there's usually one big thing that gives an episode its bad reputation, one defining moment or piece of design. However, I've always felt that if a story is good enough aside from a singular flaw like this, it doesn't deserve such a bad reputation. This is exactly the case here. I can easily say that the strengths of the episode more than outweigh the weakness of the costume design. It does such a good job of setting up and continuing plot threads, along with acknowledging Janto's place within the team and giving him a shining moment in the spotlight. Honestly, give Cyberwoman a second chance. Yes, you have to deal with a bad costume, but the rest of the story more than makes up for it. It's such an underrated gem, one of Chris Chibnall's best Doctor Who stories. But what do you think? Should it be reassessed by fans? Or should it be deleted and never seen again? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. And I'd like to give an extra special thank you to my gold level patrons, Daniel Shillito, John, Mark Hippold Guy Taylor, and Stephanie Nevin Miller. Thank you a lot for your support.